Well, now, it's time to get serious. I want to I want to recapitulate just a little bit of what you've heard to point out a couple of things. Many of us remember, as they did, when we believed that anything was possible in the United States, and in spite of a lot of indications lately that that might be in question, I still believe it. And I think that one thing that hasn't been mentioned is the bipartisan nature of all the things that were described. In the depths of the Great Depression 85 years ago, Republican Senator Norris from Nebraska, of all places, was sympathetic with the fact that 80% of the people in this valley, the 8 states of the Tennessee Valley, were living at the subsistence level, and basically little farms, no plumbing, no electricity, and lots of disease. The life expectancy was about 46 years. And the Senator Norris persuaded Franklin D. Roosevelt's brain trust that the nation needed giant new projects to create huge numbers of new jobs and build a new national infrastructure. And that's exactly why TVA was created. And by inventing systems planning before anyone had ever heard of systems planning, it built the national power grid in a decade. And the 8 states here, plus the parallel Bonneville project in Washington State area, led directly to the national grid. The rural electrification led to jobs, many jobs for people, and the upshot was education of their children, and that's what's transformed the whole situation here. And I think our speakers should take note of the fact that this project, this thing that was done in a decade, paid for itself 400 times over in the next 2 decades, and it's still paying now. And so it really transformed the entire economy of the United States. 10 years after that, in 1942, when fascism was conquering both Europe and Asia, Einstein persuaded the president the threat of nuclear weapons was real, and that's launched the Manhattan Project on a crash basis. And talk about synergy, the world's most renowned theoretical physicist and cosmologist delivered the letter that changed the world. The letter was actually written by a Hungarian immigrant, Leo Szilard, and another Hungarian immigrant whom I knew very well, Edward Teller, was asked by Szilard to drive him out to Einstein's summer home on Long Island because Szilard couldn't drive, and young Teller could. And so they went out and got him to sign the letter that was then delivered to President Roosevelt. Right here in the backwoods of Tennessee, Oak Ridge had more electric power available thanks to TVA than the city of New York, and it used every bit of that amount of power during the war to, after Y-12 was constructed, each of the big buildings over here, if you take the bus tour, you'll see them had an enormous transformer built into the back of the building, and that could handle 100 megawatts of power, because the Calutron separators that were used to separate the uranium isotopes were doing it atom by atom, and it takes a lot of atoms to make kilograms of uranium-235, and so it had to run flat out for about 2 years to make enough material for one bomb. And at the same time, the Oak Ridge, what became the Oak Ridge National Lab, that was then X-10, developed the Purex process that enabled separation of plutonium. When you cook uranium in a reactor, it generates plutonium, which then has to be separated chemically in order to make this highly fissionable material. Of course, one isotope of plutonium is right now powering the Curiosity rover on the surface of Mars with a thermal source of electricity, and another is leaving the solar system with the New Horizons probe that passed by Pluto and is on its way into the Kuiper Belt right now. And of course, the source of such materials is right here, officiated by Y12. And so it's all of a piece. You can see this energy popping up all over the place. After the war, 2 decades later, the Soviet Union was building thousands of intercontinental ballistic missiles. Every one was multiple hydrogen bomb warheads, and enough to sterilize the world hundreds of times over. Still exist. After the treaties in the early 90s, progress has been made to disassemble and deactivate a substantial fraction of those warheads. And as long as the process of collaboration between the Russians and the United States is functioning, that has led to materials winding up here that have been reduced in their concentration of uranium so that they can serve as energy fuel for power reactors. And so taking the stuff out of a warhead and diluting it, so to speak, you get something that can provide electricity for a very long time. And to put that in perspective, if you've watched the coal trains with hopper cars, 100 cars full of coal to go to the coal-fired plants, these contain 100 metric tons, about 220,000 pounds of coal per car, and one train can operate it for a day or two. And if you take 1 liter, one sample of U-235, this side, it can operate the reactor for years. And so it's all the difference in the world. The chemical energy is more than 1 million times less efficient than nuclear energy. The 50 years that have passed since then, after the moonshot, proceeded primarily based on robotic spacecraft for defense originally, and communications, global satellite relay. None of that existed at the start of the space age. And I lived here and worked here in Oak Ridge in 1960, and we were just so eager to see the first transmission of television across the Atlantic. And I watched it in my house in East Village here in Oak Ridge. It came first from France and then from England, and it was one of the most exciting things in my life to know that now we had instantaneous ability to see what was going on in the rest of the world thanks to space satellites. A few hundred people have proved the capabilities for living and working in low Earth orbit, but human space development is still considered by a government to be dangerous and expensive and of questionable investment. Fortunately, though, a handful of inspired billionaires see the real opportunities from the commercial standpoint, and they're trying valiantly, I think, to give humanity first access to the final frontier. They know that the time has come for robust commercialization of space, and that young people of the world are ready and willing to meet that challenge. It's time for a new transformative decade now, and that's why we've created this symposium here in Oak Ridge that we call the Power of Synergy. The intent of the meeting is to show that there are mature technologies and concepts having sufficiently advanced maturity that developed together they can affordably catalyze the needed breakthrough for large-scale human expansion into space. Before 2030, we believe that we can have a permanent, rapidly expanding presence on the moon, capture and industrialize tiny asteroids the size of your house that pass frequently near the Earth, and have our new heroes walking on Mars. And that's why we've convened this premier group of experts here to justify these claims. So we believe that a new combination of government and private resources can get the job done within current economic constraints. This will require new management strategies and reprogramming, but it's realistically possible when inspired. With inspired leadership, definitely. The purpose of our symposium then is to build a persuasive case for launching this winning strategy, and we hope you'll come on and help it to happen and share your wisdom and courage, and let's get it done.